In our discussion last time, we took a few steps of exploration through our existing filter of thought and experience. But there are other ways of experiencing things, and through yoga, as the consciousness grows, it begins to experience and know the same thing in different ways. We observe that our consciousness changes in 3 dimensions. There is a consciousness which can interiorize. We are, for example, extroverted or introverted. And at different times of the day, that shift changes horizontally. At night, you're more indrawn. If someone asks you to get up and jump, it's not so easy. Normally, there is an automatic cycle synchronizing with the sun. As the sun begins to rise, our consciousness gets more and more extroverted. And after sunset, it begins to turn inwards. And there's a point of transition where the outward turn reverses itself and the inward turn begins, which is the transition point. The word in Sanskrit is sandhi, the joining line, the meeting point, the meeting line, which corresponds spontaneously with the moment of sunrise and sunset. And this is the reason why traditionally they used to advise spiritual practices or meditation practices at those transition points. Because in a sense, we are on the sill, on the door of the inner world and the outer world. When we are too much within, the experience within may not impact fully the consciousness outside. And when we are too much outside, the inner world is as if lost, inaccessible. And this transition point is one of those moments when effortlessly the two are bridged. But one could consciously train oneself to turn in at will and not only enter the inner interiorized state, but go far deeper within. So deep, in fact, that you may even feel as if the whole world begins to fade away from you. Just as when you wake up from a dream, which is a highly interiorized state, as you wake up from the dream, the whole dream world fades away from you until it ceases to exist when you're fully awake. The reverse can happen as you turn in and go deep inside, that the external world begins to fade away from you. And even one can reach a point where it ceases to exist. And you are so deeply lost within that you don't even remember what it's like to be outside or to come out and know the world through the external senses. But you are fully conscious. You even have a sensory experience. You have all 5 senses accessible within. But you're exploring domains and worlds which are all in a subjective space. It's a fascinating experience. And sometimes even it feels like one doesn't want to come out of it. It's so much more vivid, more real than the external senses. I remember Swami Veda Bharati. I don't know if you've heard his name. He's a disciple of Swami Rama, who passed away only this year. He narrated how during certain deep meditation practices with his teacher, he went deep, immersed in the consciousness of undifferentiated oneness. And after that, when he returned, and at the moment when he came back to the surface and opened his eyes, he said it was a shock for him. And he said, "Oh, what is all this?" This whole experience of consciousness, which is fragmented, divided, in disharmony, is a kind of a shock compared to that deeper experience. So there is a horizontal movement of consciousness, a light swing that takes place constantly anyway, but one can choose to deepen consciously, and then it doesn't matter what time of the day. At any moment, you can turn in, go deep, come out, or even you can develop the continuity of awareness that you're fully aware within as you are outside, and you straddle two worlds. And after a while, it's not even two worlds, it's one single world, much deeper. People who live in that state, one might call them mystics or saintly people, because they seem to see, feel, know, experience things which are not accessible to the normal five senses. But it's not such a big deal when you consider what it actually represents. This is one dimension of consciousness. A second dimension is a vertical ascension. At the moment when you wake up from sleep, you are still half conscious. Your awareness is largely of the body sensations. You are not conscious of abstract thoughts. If at all you have images, words, they are mechanical remnants from the dream. And then as you begin to wake up, you become more self-aware, you become more aware of your feelings and thoughts. If you notice, at the moment of waking up, it's body consciousness that is more real, more vivid. You feel uncomfortable. And there's a kind of a sensation-based thought. It's not even a formed thought. A sensation of discomfort and an instinct to set right the discomfort. What is it? Is the fan switched off? Is it too cold, too warm? You pull the cloth to cover yourself. You remove the cloth to adjust. But the thought involved is a sense-based thought. It's not even a free intellectual thought. And from there, as you get up, go through your routines, shower, you wake up more and more fully until at some point you are in your world of intellectual thought, mind. And at that point, the body sensations seem to be less important. They don't affect you so much. The body is uncomfortable, you barely notice. Sometimes you're so engrossed in thought, you don't notice that your stomach is hungry. And after an hour, you notice, oh, there was a pain there for the last 1 hour. Oh, I'm hungry, I forgot, it's time. Does that happen to you? And so you shift in a kind of a vertical ascension, up and down. And again, there is a natural rhythm of the rising and falling. If you observe the kinds of interactions you have during the day, you will notice the character of the interaction matches a certain level of consciousness. When you sit and gossip with friends, whether face-to-face or on phone, you will see it is a level which is sensational. There's a sensation, a tickling, a kind of an emotion which is bordering on a physical sensation. It excites you, it tickles you somewhere, but it has no rational content. Or you are in deep thought, thinking of things which have nothing to do with the material world. You may have questions like, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I supposed to do? What do I really want? And at that point, it has nothing to do with physical sensations or emotions. And you can have the swing, the shift, depending on the kind of activities that you are in. When you watch a movie or a play on at the theater, the experience is not complete unless it touches all these levels. A movie which is purely intellectual leaves you somehow feeling incomplete. A movie which is purely emotional, again, leaves you somehow missing something which would make it purposeful, meaningful, give it a direction. And so it's as if our experience of life needs to span the full range for us to feel complete. But mostly we are oscillating in a range which represents our normal state of consciousness. But the normal is just a habit and you can change it. And perhaps even at different stages in your life, it was different. There's a third dimension of consciousness changing, and that is a physical sense of widening. So you will notice you have a range around your body which you call your personal space. And if someone sits too close to you, it's as if they intrude in your personal space and you feel a little uncomfortable and you move aside. And the person moves again and you move aside. If you observe the dynamics in a group on a social occasion, everyone is standing in the room holding something to eat or drink and they chat. And you observe two people at a certain distance. If one person approaches too much, the other moves back. And there's a kind of a natural, comfortable space. And if you watch the whole thing over a span of 10 or 15 minutes, you might see them dancing around, one person pursuing and chasing the other like that. Fun? Yes. And especially people who are more sensitive, as would be many of you, you need a larger distance. And you feel uncomfortable when someone comes too close, or if it's somebody that you're comfortable with, then you don't mind them being close. And what determines this comfort feel? And we say it has to do with the vibes. And what is this vibes? And what happens when they come too close? And what's wrong when the vibes do not match? What's different there? And what's happening, in fact, is that there are layers around the physical. We briefly touched upon it last time. But there are layers of consciousness which are almost material to begin with, the subtle physical, becoming more and more subtle until at a distance of about this much, we experience like a envelope or a cocoon of awareness. But there's more beyond that also. In fact, for a person who is very sensitive, the extent can be much larger. Often, when there is a great development in the expansion of consciousness, one may even be sensitive to everything that happens in the room or beyond, in the house, or even further. There are saints who have felt the pain of a creature which is far away. Ramakrishna Paramahansa, as he watched a bullock being whipped, felt the pain of the bullock on his back. And the identification was so complete and so physical that even the marks of the whip appeared on his back. That's the kind of extension and material character of the extension that his consciousness or his aura had. But this horizontal extension also is dynamic. It changes. I think most of you have driven cars. When you're driving a car and you have to park and the parking gap is very narrow, you take the car in and you can sense that the edge of the car is missing the other car by just about this much. You can sense it, although you cannot see it physically. How does that happen? A part of your consciousness extends to include the outline of the car when you're driving. And when you're driving at high speed, your sensitivity is enhanced and a part of your consciousness extends much further, sensing things in the region beyond. You're not doing it consciously, but just the intention to be aware and to be vigilant creates a kind of an extension. So when you're parking and there's a very tight parking space, you have an intention to be more vigilant of the corners. Your consciousness becomes sensitive in that and can feel the distance actually. And you know that it's too tight and you back off. The captain of a ship identifies with the ship completely. And if the person is sufficiently sensitive, he can even feel when something is going wrong. The engine doesn't sound quite right. Something is wrong. And he calls up the engineer. Do you have a problem? And the engineer says, yes, there's some problem with the whatever. He sensed it before he was informed. And the identification can be so complete there that traditionally they say when the ship sinks, the captain goes down with the ship because it's like your own body, it's your own extension. I had occasion to meet a captain of a ship who had been through many ships in his career, and I asked him, what does it mean to you, for you? What does the ship mean to you? And he said, it's like your wife. And I said, is there a difference? He said, yes, the ship is more than a wife. Because it's also the vehicle which carries your life, protects you during the storms, and not just you, but your entire family of 200 people who are probably on the ship, for whom you're responsible. So this extension of consciousness is the third dimension, which also has a natural fluctuation according to activities, and we are not aware of it. But as we develop and grow in consciousness, all three dimensions may grow. We may learn to deepen and live from deeper within. We may learn to rise in consciousness in the highest ranges of the intellect, or even beyond those, in higher ranges of intuitive consciousness. And we may experience a widening of our consciousness. Naturally, if any one of these begins to happen, the other two tend to follow, but not always. If, for example, there's an ascent of consciousness, because the higher ranges are naturally wider, we experience a widening that takes place in us. The result of that, though, is our perspective of life changes. We see things differently. We understand and know things differently. I give an example here. Consider the difficulties that you face in your life, the problems which are currently worrying you. And you see how important they are for you. And now if you step out of your own perspective, look at your life in a third person. Station yourself at the top of a 10-story building. Look at all the people living in all those flats. Each one of them has their own problems. Some of them may even be bigger than yours. And then in that big picture of hundreds of people having their own hundreds of problems, look at yourself. And perhaps you might not consider your problem to be such a big thing. If you station yourself at the top of the hill and look down and see the city below. You've been to Tiruvannamalai already? You've been? Okay, you will. Okay, you'll go up? Okay. So as you go up the hill and you look down, you'll see these little ant-like human beings wandering around, little vehicles like matchboxes, taking in these ants and throwing them out, moving around. You see a vehicle start here, you know where it will be after half an hour, because your perspective is so wide. You see someone get out of their house, you know exactly what their day is going to be like. And after a while, because of the distance, the whole thing seems so mundane. City life, routine of life is so meaningless, pointless, just like ants going round and round, foraging, repeating, accumulating food, eating, surviving. And especially when you're in a sacred space, as on this hill of the Arunachala hill, it does something to you. Your thoughts automatically drift to things which have lasting value, to immortality, to eternity, to infinity, unity, things which are meaningful, lasting, real, and against which all these things look so ephemeral, meaningless, pointless. And afterwards, when you come back, at first you don't quite fit in. You feel strange. You feel like a stranger. And then as you fall back into your routine, you kind of fall in consciousness to your normal state, and in your normal cycle of oscillation, that begins to fade, and this becomes the normal. But consider if your whole life was lived in that state, what would you do? What would you consider important? What kind of people would you keep as your friends? Which relationships would naturally fade away from your life? What kind of activities would you want to spend more time in? And it's useful to think like that. But there's something even more radical that happens when we rise in consciousness. Observe that at the moment of waking up, your emotional reactions are not very different from children or even animals. It's only when you come into your own as a self-aware thinking being, living in your thoughts, that you automatically restrain your emotions and think what's good, what's right, what do you want to do you want to get upset or not. And you have a greater freedom, you have a choice. When you're identified with your emotions, you're bound in the instinct and the reaction. You're a slave, a victim of your own training and habits. But if you were to continue further and above the domain of your thinking mind, there are further ranges where you have even greater freedom. Not only greater freedom of knowledge, greater freedom of action, just greater freedom of awareness. You feel wide, you feel light, you feel free. And there's a spontaneous joy which fills this wide, free awareness. And it's possible to develop your capacity to enter those domains and even to live in them. The first thing that happens when you start doing that, you notice your thoughts change character. While earlier you used to have one little thought at a time in some sequence, often wandering, often unaware even what you're thinking of, here you become aware of your thoughts and your thoughts are wider, more inclusive, as if larger. They seem to hold multiple ideas in a single glimpse. So, just as an exercise, you catch someone on the road and say, "What are you thinking?" What will be the response? "Oh," it's as if you have broken him out of a hypnosis. "Oh, what were you thinking?" "I don't remember. I don't know. Nothing in particular." He's already forgotten what he was thinking. In fact, it was not a conscious thought. It was more a sentimental, drifting emotion, sensation of thought wandering around, jumping by association. So if you can do this as an exercise, you observe your own thoughts, take a trigger word. So if I say to you, the color red, observe your thought jump. Where did it go? And then it jumps from there, and then it jumps, and then it jumps. And in about 10 seconds, it's already made 3 or 4 hops. So the red reminded you of something, perhaps a fruit which reminded you of something, which reminded you of something. But that's really the condition of our normal state of mind. We're not even thinking, actually. If you can train your mind to become quiet, stand back from this activity and will it into silence, then you can consciously think what you want to think. And that's the first step to mastering your mind and also your emotions. Not only you can think what you want to think, you can not think what you don't want to think, which is a more useful capacity. So much of our thinking is actually causing us pain. How often have you struggled to get rid of a thought that's bothering you? And you just can't seem to. The more you try to push it away, it's as if it's sticky. It clings to you. The more you push it, the more you get embedded in it. And the only way to break that sometimes is to stop struggling and turn your attention to some different activity. Get involved in something, and so you as if forget. But what you're doing it is replacing that sticky thought by other activities, other thoughts. You never really get free from the thought process itself. And as a result, right now within the mind, there are many different thought processes one of which may predominate as your main thought, but other things are going on mechanically and sometimes behind layers. While sitting idly, you might find a tune kicking in and repeating itself mechanically at the back. Sometimes it goes on for so long that you've got used to it, you don't even notice it's there. And it's only when you hear it, it pops out. Oh yeah, it's been hanging in my mind for a long time. And you just can't get rid of it. All of these things suck energy from your mind. They drain, they're like leeches sucking the vitality of the mind. They don't allow your mind to freely use its full potential. Scientists say that we use less than 1/10 of our brain power. It's for this reason. Actually, the rest is being used, but it's just being wasted in these meaningless thought impressions. So when you learn to not think what you don't want to think, you can think what you want or not think at all, and you can hold your mind like that, quiet, and it's nice. It feels good to be free of thoughts. But this is the first step to thought mastery. When you're able to not think and then think what you want to think, you'll find the energy that you put in the thought that you want is a one-pointed energy. And the result is you gain the knowledge of what you want to think quickly, directly, easily. Your comprehension when you're reading something is much deeper, more direct. The experience of dealing with knowledge undergoes a change. Knowledge becomes more easily accessible, more spontaneous even. But if you can maintain this state of silence of the mind and then turn up a step, there is a layer above where the way we cognize changes. So Sri Aurobindo takes great pain to describe these levels of consciousness, describing their characteristics and also how we can ascend consciously from one level to another. So just to give you a sense of what it's like, I can make a quick description of these steps. So the first level, the level at which we are already and as thinking beings, is not the domain in which we live most of the time. We live in a level which is sentiment, emotion, mind. Okay? So it's barely just crossing the threshold of the animal thought impressions. And that's where we are normally, except when the situation demands we rise a little bit into pure thought. We have the capacity, but we don't use it. But from this pure thought, we are in a domain where we have thoughts which are pieces. They're small pieces, they're finite glimpses, and they are in chains, and you have to work them out in sequence of logic to get to something useful. So there is an effort of thinking. If you watch somebody's thinking, and if you see inside their mind, you will see a laborious process. When the person has a clear thought and forms with a conscious intent the thought, you can see the thought becoming as if taking shape, taking form from a cloud-like form. It becomes more clear, it takes a distinctive form, and then it emerges from the forehead and drifts away as a separate thought. Every thought you have is actually released in the atmosphere. Fortunately, most of our thoughts are not very cohesive and clear, and so they're just like little puffs of clouds which drift out and fizzle away. But a clearly formed thought will emerge, drift and wander around, and if there's an intent put into it, it will try to fulfill its intent. So if you, for example, put a strong thought that you want somebody to remember you, the thought will actually go to that person and attach itself to their aura and then kind of nudge their mind, trying to draw their mind to remember you. And eventually, if that happens, well, it has fulfilled its purpose. It may either fizzle out, or if the shell is well formed, it may disentangle and come back to you, having done its work, reattaching itself to you to draw energy from you. And once it draws energy, it goes back to do its thing and repeats itself in cycles. Because it's your substance of mind. It's a part of you. And so we put out a lot of thoughts like this, which are wandering, little pieces. And our thinking process itself is just processes of little pieces of thought. So the first step rising above this intellectual mind, Sri Aurobindo calls higher mind, where it's as if your mind opens to a wide vision, wide perspective. And when we look from a wide perspective, as from the top of a hill, you do not see small ant individuals only. You see chunks, large groups. You do not see just one person walking on the road. You see all the roads crisscrossing and all the people wandering. The whole system of transport, navigation is seen in a single glimpse. You see not one house, but the whole group of houses. And so, the same way, the thought itself is one large chunk, including many smaller thoughts and their interrelations. And if you have to articulate that, you can't say it in a single word, or you will lose a lot of detail. If you have to articulate it in detail, it would be a paragraph. So, as we normally operate at the level of the intellect, when we read a text, we read it not one word at a time, but in chunks of words, 2 words, 3 words at a time. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. When you read fast, there's a very interesting email which was going around for a while where entire sentence was formed of jumbled letters within each word. The first letter of the word was correct, the last letter was correct, and all the letters in between were mixed up. And if you don't stop to read each word separately, you just read the sentence, you'll find your eyes and your mind, they flow across, and you get the meaning easily, effortlessly. And you wonder, how is this possible? As children in kindergarten, you were taught to spell words one letter at a time and to read sentences one word at a time. But here your eyes are just going across and you know the meaning of the word, you know what the word is, although it's all jumbled letters. If you can get hold of that email, try it out or just make one. It's fascinating to realize your mind is capable of this effortlessly without training. But this is the reality, that at the level of normal thinking, we don't read one word at a time. We read groups of words, 2 or 3 at a time even. And then something in the mind assembles all that to form the meaning of the sentence. If the sentence is too long, we need to break it up with commas, semicolons, which are the chunks that our mind can comfortably manage. But when the mind opens out in the higher mind, it's not just these chunks, it's not even the sentences, but it's the entire paragraph that you hold in a single gaze. Now, in the act of reading also, you may actually be able to scan chunks like that, lines at a time or paragraphs at a time. Swami Vivekananda could take a book and literally turn pages at this speed. And so people asked him, how do you read so fast? He said, well, you people read one word at a time, I read one paragraph at a time. It's possible, it's not too difficult. It's natural to this level of consciousness because it thinks like that in large chunks, but it is still thought. The thought itself has so many complex elements. It's like a complex sculpture with layers within, chunks within, formed in relation, arranged like that, like a whole machine held, not parts of a machine. The whole thing is there, but it's still a thought. And such a thought going out can actually not only have a far greater force, but can do many complex things. Not just make someone think of you, but project a thought which involves a whole project and an outcome. And the thought released with sufficient force can actually go and do its thing. And this is how we say great minds influence the world. So the higher mind, in a certain sense, we can say, is the one self leaning to form thoughts. And therefore, every thought belonging to the higher mind holds itself in reference to that backdrop of infinity, eternity, oneness. They are as if we may push the language, they are thoughts of eternity, thoughts of infinity, thoughts of oneness. So when such a mind looks at, let's take something trivial, looks at the flowers on the trees, automatically, effortlessly, you see these flowers in the context of all nature and how they express the joy of nature. And at the back of the mind is the sense of eternity when across all time nature has been expressing her joy through such forms of flowers, and the huge variety of flowers represent all the joys of her expression. While I enjoy this one flower, this is held at the back of my mind because, well, that's how the higher mind works. It sees things in these large visions. But it's still thinking, it's still a thought, it still has a form and involves a process. When one goes a little further above that, Sri Aurobindo uses the word illumined mind. So we notice here at the level of the higher mind, the thought includes many different aspects, many different elements. In the illumined mind, the thinking process stops. There is only a seeing. So I'll describe this in this way. If you had to picture an apple, so you picture an apple in your mind, you're seeing it from a certain angle, from a certain side. Can you see it from the other side? Not much difficulty. Yes, you can see the other side. Can you see both sides? Your mind automatically tends to switch from one to the other. Can you see it from top and from bottom also? And it seems strange because we're habituated to seeing from one perspective only. We have never had the experience of seeing from all directions at the same time. We didn't even realize it could be possible. But what if you had 20 eyes and they were in a circle and the apple was placed in the middle? Then you would see from all around, isn't it? In your consciousness, you can do that. Try to do this. It's an interesting exercise. Try to hold the apple in your mind's eye now and encircle it with your sight until you hold the full awareness of the entire surface all around. It's not too difficult. But if you can get it, you notice already you've stopped seeing from one point of view. You're seeing from all around. The awareness you have is not so much a reduced picturization in 2D, but an awareness of the full surface more than a reduced picture. You're aware of the full surface around, and you're aware of your awareness surrounding the apple. And you're as if sensing, right? So this is the nature of the seeing consciousness. There is no thinking out. You're seeing, and you're seeing increasingly from all directions, from not only from around it, from above, from below, but even from inside out. But you see things, but you are separate from the thing you see. And it's illumined mind because the nature of the activity is light, illumination of awareness. You're aware directly, simply. Whereas earlier you were thinking it out, now the thought has stopped. There is only an awareness, and the awareness can become more and more complete, multifaceted, multi-sided, inside out as much as outside in. What if the apple was semi-transparent and you could see the seeds inside and feel the texture of things around? Not only see them, but also begin to feel them. Do you know a dolphin has something very close to this? When it sees you, it can of course see with physical eyes, but it can see with sound. And so when you enter the water, the dolphin can scan you with its sound, and it does a sound which goes like, it spans many frequencies. And as it moves like that, it's scanning you with each frequency, and the sound goes into your body tissue and reflects from each part of the tissue. So from the surface of your skin, there's one wave. From the surface of your lungs, there's a second wave. From the surface of your heart, there's another wave. From the bones, there's a different wave. And all of which comes into the dolphin to form an image of you in 3 dimensions like an X-ray, except it's much more sophisticated than X-ray. It can feel the quality of the texture from the reflection of sound, because the sound is modified by the texture. So the soft tissue puts out a different echo from the hard tissue, from the coarse tissue, from the rigid, from the elastic. So it's actually experiencing your whole body in 3D, all through inside all the layers of tissue and substance, and their elasticity and their, almost you would say, touch or taste. And that's natural to the dolphin. But if you could feel that with your consciousness directly, that would give you some sense of what this domain of the illumined mind can do. It's as if light penetrating all through, reflecting through all parts, layers, and revealing everything inside the object. Or that would be the nature of the cognition of anything, any situation, any problem, any question, any circumstance. Your mind turns to know about what's happening right now in this situation, why is it happening, and you see everything inside out, outside in, from all perspectives, feeling even the sensations of the things. But still there's a separation. I am aware of that. But as this continues, you can notice how the attention can actually move closer and closer until in the feeling of sensations, it begins to identify with the object. Now, the separation between I, the observer, and the object thins out. I'm feeling the apple inside out from the tissue, texture, substance, taste, smell, color, everything at the same time, until I feel myself almost one with the apple. And at that point, we have shifted to one more layer, which is what we would call the intuitive consciousness. The intuitive consciousness knows things in identity. So we started with the intellectual mind, having pieces of thoughts. We moved to the higher mind, which has these large chunks of inclusive, complex, richly detailed thought. We moved to the illumined mind, where we see and we see within. And through that, as we move still higher, the seeing merges into an identity, and we've now come to the intuitive mind. And so every time the intuitive mind, so to say, thinks, it thinks in experience. It is what it knows. Whatever it chooses to know, when the knowledge is there, it is an experiential knowledge. So in the intuitive mind, if I want to know the apple, I look at the apple or I take it in my hand and I feel what the apple feels. I know it's not yet quite ripe. In another day or two, it will be ripe. You've seen people do that when they go to the market, they pick up a vegetable, perhaps they squeeze it a little bit and then they say, 3 days, it'll be ready. How do you explain it? You say, wow, how did you know? Oh, it's okay, you'll learn with experience. What happens with experience is some part of you learns to feel and to identify. It's in fact an intuitive faculty operating through the mask of your senses and intellectual mind. The capacity is inherent in all of us, but it is veiled through layers of activity of mind. If you could train your mind to become quiet, even to become silent, all of these faculties can begin to act more and more directly. Not only you can look at the apple and know it's the right one, you could simply reach into the barrel of apples and pull out the one that is the best. And your hand would know where to go and pick up and pull it out. Not only that, the intuition, because it is experiential content, you can transmit to another or to receive from another an experience. I'm tempted to share an experience. I was, we had, as students, we had lottery on Christmas Day. And there was a pot with little notes of paper with some number written on it, or they were blank. And you put your hand in, you picked whatever came. So it so happened it was my turn, and I had a friend with me, and I just knew that I'm going to get it. It was something intuitive. So I reached in, I pulled out, yes, it had a number, and then I still felt that thing was there, the thing which was, and I told my friend, you're going to get it. And I kind of nudged that thing. And my friend, instead of taking the opportunity, he turned around and very graciously pushed somebody else in his stead, who put his hand in and got the number. And my friend didn't get it. It's a strange feeling when such a thing happens. You wonder, what is this thing which you feel? You can actually feel it like an energy which has the thing itself, the experience, the conviction of the experience, and it can even be transmitted. And this is all normal to the domain of intuition. Just as when you have a thought at the level of the intellect, you can articulate the thought and provoke an idea in someone else's mind through words. In the intuitive consciousness, you can push and transmit that. Now, something of this is actually happening all the time when we are in a class, studying, discussing. If you recall your days in school, when you had to sit and hear some very complex ideas, philosophical, mathematical, things which you were not always comfortable with, there would be a point where your concentration would click and you'd get it. The moment of getting it is fascinating. Observe what happens. Somebody is trying to explain to you some new concept, and they repeat it maybe a dozen times, and you don't seem to get it. It's just words. It doesn't quite mean something to you. And then as you concentrate, you as if touch, and there's a flash, and, I got it. There's this moment of awakening, enlightening. I got it. And then there's an excitement, and you immediately turn to the others who are not getting it and say, it's so simple, it's so obvious. Observe what is it that happened in the experience, and observe what you meant when you said it's obvious. When you say something is obvious, what you mean is, I can see it. It's there. You just have to see it. And when you see it, you know it, right? You also have the sense that you already knew it, and you just uncovered what you already knew. Okay? And then when you try to explain to somebody, you say, okay, look at it this way. You're shifting their perspective of how they look. And then suddenly there's a flash, and they say, oh yeah, I get it. So if you've ever had these kinds of experiences, we often have this in school when there's a puzzle that is given and somebody gets it, and you look at the person and then pop, you get it. And there's this whole movement which jumps around. People get it. And the teacher says, okay, keep quiet, let the others think. It's not the thinking which got it. It was some point of contact where you touched and then it lit up, and that was it. So that moment is the point where your consciousness touches the knowledge and in identity knows it. And when a complex idea is being explained and you're in concentration, if you remain distracted or superficial, your mind slightly wandering, you'll never get it. You have to concentrate. And what is concentration? A bringing together of your awareness on a single point. And in that point, you place in the direction of the idea. And as it kind of bores through, it touches, and suddenly there's the flash, I got it. And sometimes you got something, and the teacher says, wait, you have not yet got it fully, wait. And you observe, if you continue, something more unfolds and something more unfolds. Had you stopped short, you would have only got a part of it. And so if you notice, in all acquisition of knowledge, there is this process inherent. We think we understand because somebody explains well. No, the explanation being well is only the vehicle to link your mind and your attention. The person holding a clarity of the experience and then being able to kind of transmit it is what makes it a clear contact, a clear experience, and a good teacher. And at that moment, you say, I got it. But notice at that point when you got it, you are one with the knowledge. You live it. You're one with what you know. And at that moment, you're also inspired. When you get it, someone says, okay, now do it. It happens. If the time passes, I got it, now it's kind of faded out. And you say, do it now, you don't have the same energy, you don't have the same spontaneity. So in this point of contact of intuition, there is not only knowledge, but also inspiration. It inspires you and even acts through you at that moment. Afterwards, it's as if the intuitive point of contact fades into the background and the informational form of it in the surface intellectual mind is what remains. And there the inspiration is no more with you. Okay, so one can train oneself to live in this part of the consciousness where you know intuitively, can connect intuitively, and remain there constantly. And then while you're having a conversation with somebody, you are receiving all things intuitively, not just through the words. And imagine what kind of an experience that would be. You feel what the person describes. You know what they mean even before they've completed their words. Sometimes the person starts speaking, the first word forms the connection and you know what they're going to say. But you know not in words, you know in experience what they're going to say because you can feel it. And at that moment, because you're experiencing what they are going to say, you are enriched. You have the experience that they had without having gone through the struggles that they have gone through. Isn't that interesting? It's something like this which happens when we have a complete identification with a character in a movie. You can watch a 2-hour movie which represents a lifetime experience of somebody. And you come away from the movie having grown, having enriched yourself in a whole lifetime experience. But how did you acquire that feeling of a lifetime experience? In identification with the person. A well-made movie is one which helps you to identify and then leads you into a change of consciousness. You experience a growth and you come away now changed. And it happened in a part of you which connected and received in the intuitive, and from there, of course, it reflects in the other parts. So the intuitive consciousness is really the first point where you have direct knowledge and experiential knowledge. You are what you know. And yet, it's a point of the ocean of knowledge. It's a drop. You made a point of contact. And around the point of contact can be a zone where you're aware, but beyond which you're aware that you do not know. I got this, but what about that? How does it link with that? Now, if you're in the intuitive consciousness, your mind turning to look at the link, there's a second flash. This is how it connects with that. And then that, flash, 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 a series of flashes. And as one grows, drifts higher into this range of intuitive consciousness, the flashes become almost continuous. And it's almost like lightning, which is continuously happening, and it's lit up almost like day. But still, your awareness drifting reveals like a torchlight in a dark room. You don't see the whole room, you see pieces at a time. And you sweep over whatever it is you want to know, all the links. You can widen the beam or narrow the beam, but it's still a finite experience at a time. If you move a little further in consciousness, drifting higher beyond intuition, hereafter it's all true knowledge, it's all direct knowledge. Knowledge by identity is normal here. But the degree of identity, the wideness of the knowledge identity, the beam of light widening increases until it lights up the whole room. And we rise into what Sri Aurobindo calls the over-mental consciousness. Now, there are reasons why he uses these terms. We need not go into that. But the term is also suggestive. So at this point, you're not really in a mental consciousness. You look at things and you see the whole intuitively. That is, you experience oneness with the whole, but there is a special focus and all the rest is seen in relation to it. And it kind of fades out into infinity, but you're aware of the infinity. It is at this level of the overmental consciousness that we can say truly we live in a universal consciousness. But there are many experiences of universality. I can experience the universe from this center, from that center, from the other center, from the top of a mountain, from the depth of a valley, from the inside of a chicken's egg, from the top of a volcano, from the bottom of the ocean, from the perspective of the sun. Each experience of the whole universe is completely different, but it's always the whole universe. And this is the character of what we describe as the overmental consciousness. And as you ascend even within this, there is more and more a completeness of the whole. The infinity, eternity, oneness of the whole becomes more and more intense and vivid until you are seeing the all, not seeing, experiencing the all with an emphasis from a center. But if that emphasis from the center itself merges into equal emphasis from all centers, it's as if I experience the whole universe from every possible center that exists in the universe and know it all from all those centers simultaneously in a single, undivided whole. That would be the next step that Sri Aurobindo calls supra-mental. And this is a consciousness of oneness. This is consciousness of undivided oneness, but which knows all possible division. There can be no contraries within this consciousness. All perspectives are included in it. If you bring to me a completely contrary statement, that is already included in this viewpoint. So for the supramental consciousness, there is no such thing as opposition. In the overmental consciousness, you can still have that. I look at the whole universe from the perspective of the hammer, and you look at the whole universe from the perspective of the nail, and the hammer can slam into the nail. The nail can say, ouch, or it can say, oh, that was fun. But still, there's a relationship in which there can be an opposition. But in the supramental consciousness, because I am both the hammer and the nail equally, and the meeting of the hammer and the nail is also included in my experience, and the meeting does not involve any breakdown, any conflict, any contradiction. It's just another way of expressing my own variations. There is no opposition, no conflict. It is therefore the only consciousness in which all contraries find their reconciliation. Every philosophy, every religion, every viewpoint, every interest, however momentary, is included in its perspective. So even if something comes to oppose the supramental consciousness, the opposing viewpoint is already included in mine. I can use that to fulfill whatever I have to do. And therefore, when the supramental consciousness acts, its action is effortless, smooth, spontaneous. And even opposition is used by it to fulfill itself more completely. And it's kind of, we can understand it, but it's difficult to imagine what that experience would be like. But it would be the way the divine consciousness acts. It would be the way, I'm sorry to use the word, God works in the universe. Okay, so we have a problem with the word God. We're going to avoid that. We'll say the divine consciousness manifests in the universe effortlessly, spontaneously, always in harmony with whatever happens. There is nothing in the divine perspective which represents a fundamental disharmony. If at all one calls it a disharmony, it is only for the purpose of the play. But it is still something which serves the larger divine purpose. And therefore, when the divine wills something, it inevitably follows, and effortlessly. If the circumstances are too different, then the unfoldment in our human experience of time may be longer, but it is just as inevitable, more rich perhaps, more complete perhaps, but still as smooth and inevitable. This is the experience from the self. If you act from the self, this is how things would happen spontaneously. So there is not only this spontaneous action effortlessly, but there is also the complete knowledge. And these two we describe as omnipotence and omniscience. So omnipotence does not mean I can smash my way through everything. That would not be omnipotence, because I also experience opposition. It's not all power. True all power is when I do not experience opposition, even when something thinks it is opposing. Right? So that's the true sense of omnipotence. Because that is included in my action. So the divine acts with omnipotence, omniscience, and both of these are the natural station in the supramental consciousness. It's also the point where the oneness knows the multiplicity without any sense of loss or incapacity. And so Sri Aurobindo observes that in the human evolution, all our struggles, material, energetic, intellectual, all our incapacities on all these levels can find their resolution only in a consciousness such as this. Anything else in between eventually has some limitation because it has division. And Sri Aurobindo points to this consciousness as the next inevitable step in human evolution. Just as the mind emerged out of the intellectual mind emerged out of the animal mind, and animal mind emerged out of life forms and plants emerged out of so-called dead matter. So too out of the human intellectual mind must emerge the supermind, because it is the secret power and source of our mental capacities. In the ascension of evolution, Sri Aurobindo observes something very interesting. He says, each step of evolution represents the creation or the expression of something which is the very opposite of what was before. So first we had empty space, the void, vacuum, whatever name one gives to it. Nothing, out of which something came. So the something is the opposite of nothing. Appearance of matter and form in a void is a miracle. Out of this dead matter, so-called, emerged living matter, life, plant, which is the very opposite of dead matter. Miracle. Out of living, sensational plant emerged conscious awareness from something which was unconscious. or subconscious. Again, the opposite, miraculous. And yes, this consciousness has grown through degrees until it has reached self awareness in the human mind. But otherwise, we're not too different from the animals. Even we find many animals have developed self awareness, not as sophisticated and rich as ours. Dolphins, for example, have self awareness, the chimpanzee, even elephants, and more recently, a few more animals have been shown to have it, even some dogs, not all dogs, but the more developed of the species, they have self awareness. And how do we know they have self awareness? The test is very simple. You put a spot on the forehead, where they can't see the spot of color, and place them before a mirror. Now, there are little animals who look at the creature in the mirror and the dog starts barking, thinking it's someone else. But the more developed, conscious dog knows it is a reflection of itself. It sees this spot and tries to, immediately it identifies, tries to scrape it off. The chimpanzee looks at them in the mirror and tries to scrape it off. The dolphin, similarly, or the elephant. And it shows that they have this ability to turn the image back onto themselves to map into self awareness. Human baby does the same. But from human baby, which would be the degree of self awareness that you find in the animal, in the highest of the animals, we grow to a much more sophisticated self awareness into an adult, right? If you continued the journey and went through all these levels of consciousness, you would have a more and more complete self-awareness until in the highest you're one with the self that is one with all things. The self from which of the universe is yourself. That would be the completion of self-awareness. But in each step of evolution, there has been this new something which was the very opposite and a miraculous leap. Out of the mind of intellect, which is formed of finiteness and pieces, which can know only by cutting up things and joining pieces, we make a leap into something which knows unity without needing to cut up, which is what it knows, which is complete, which is one. And so that is the next evolutionary great leap. Of course, the great leap itself involves many smaller steps and stages, which are these levels of consciousness that we described. In a sense, the human mind itself is undergoing a kind of a transformation into this higher mind. We won't use the higher mind, we will Sri Aurobindo uses the word mind of knowledge, as distinct from mind of ignorance. So we live in a consciousness which is a mind of ignorance. We don't know. We need to know by machinery, by process, through senses, by accumulating pieces of information, putting them together and making sense of it. Right? That's the way the intellect works. So it is a mind of ignorance. All knowledge is outside it. It is insufficient in itself. It must reach out through the senses, gather pieces, but the pieces of knowledge, they become so big it cannot handle them because it can only handle pieces and finiteness. So it represents the knowledge by symbols, and then it combines symbols to produce some idea, which then it tries to match and see whether it fits. And it's a whole slow, unstable, unreliable process. In contrast, up there is the mind of knowledge that knows that is what it knows. And in between is a transitional mind, he calls, the mind of self-forgetful knowledge. So it's the consciousness awakening into intuition. It sees, it knows, it catches in a flash. But the moment of the flash, it's like, it's obvious, I already knew it, it just got uncovered. So there is this sense that all knowledge is somewhere within me lost. And at the moment of knowing, it's just got revealed, it's just got uncovered, and I begin to draw out from within me what I need to know. I don't have sources from outside. I look at the apple, I know, and the knowledge came from within me. Increasingly, the inner realm of knowledge is more and more lit up until it reaches the fullness of the mind of knowledge. And this is the transition we are, all of us, making right now. Now, the question is this: are we going to make this transition in the next, let's say, 1,000 years, 10 lifetimes? Or would we like to do it a little faster, perhaps in a single lifetime? Perhaps even experience some of these things in the next 5 years, 10 years? It's not such a big deal, actually. You can do that. You can have experiences and glimpses of these domains, however partial, but the act of having a glimpse already is such a great relief. And the rest becomes, it's just a question of enjoying the way equally. The first step to train yourself to open to the consciousness of intuition is to train your mind to become silent. To be able to make it silent at will and to stay in that silence for as long as required. This is the first step. The second exercise, which you will find now takes it to a new level, is to shift the center of your thought from somewhere inside the head to the top of the head. Because in the subtle body, the different levels of consciousness map out through certain centers, which we call the chakras. And they are in an ascending column, each opening to a different level of consciousness in the subtle body. And so here in the center of the forehead is the center of our intellectual thought. At the top of the head, at the Sahasrara, thousand petal lotus, is where the individual consciousness opens to infinity, to the cosmos. But it's also where the mind opens out to the intuitive and higher ranges. So consciously shift the center of thought to this. What does that feel like? And you can just do it. Put your attention here, feel this center, and hold your attention there. It's as simple as that. But hold it long enough. Feel yourself right here. And if you like, if it helps, make a light touch. Touch the top of the head right here. And then you have a point of sensation. That's enough. You've touched it once. Put your attention on that sensation. And just feel yourself more and more there. If it helps, you can close your eyes. And then after a while, you will feel as if above this center is something vast, immense, like a whole ocean above. And just turn your attention upwards, becoming conscious of this wide, dense ocean. Like a vast presence or power, peace, light, ocean of peace, ocean of light, just an oceanic presence. And just remain aware of it. And then very gently, you can let yourself immerse into that wide, vast presence. Let yourself immerse in it. Let yourself as if gently dissolve into it. Lose yourself in it. like a drop losing itself in the ocean, aware only of the ocean. And as you let yourself dissolve into it, dissolve into that wideness, remaining immersed in it, you notice that you are pretty much everywhere and nowhere in particular. There's no sense of separateness. There is only a vastness. There's only a sense of infinity. And remain immersed in that. Let yourself remain immersed in that infinite. No sense of separateness, only that vastness. And then very gently, very gradually, let your attention gather, slowly as if emerging from the infinite, gathering back into a drop, as if the ocean leaning down to form a drop, perhaps a large drop, but still gently returning and settling back to the top of the head. Until you're aware once again of the surface of the top of your head, opening out now to the vast above. And enjoy that feeling, enjoy the freedom. And then slowly, gradually, let this awareness settle at the top of the head, as if the whole ocean above leaning and gently settling on top of the head, and then slowly spreading downwards, spreading into the head. As if the ocean of peace and light above slowly flowing down to fill the head, filling the brain with its presence, light, and peace. Feel it filling the whole brain and slowly spreading down to fill the rest of the head. Perhaps filling, perhaps surrounding, or perhaps both. Filling and surrounding the head with its dense presence, peace, light. And then slowly let it spread down into the neck. Enjoy the sensation of a soothing, cooling, or warming peace and presence as it spreads down. And let it settle gradually into the chest, filling and surrounding the shoulders and the chest, spreading like a dense liquid peace, light presence. Gradually turn your awareness once again towards the top of the head and let your attention drift back to the top of the head, feeling the sensation at the top, the consciousness opening up upwards to that vast ocean of peace, light, and presence. Feeling once again that freedom and wideness and vastness. And let a fresh wave of that peace and light flow down into the body, streaming down through the head, filling and surrounding the head. Spreading down through the neck, into the chest, filling and surrounding. Filling the arms and hands, and continuing downwards, filling and surrounding the abdomen, spreading down through the hips and thighs, filling and surrounding all the way through the calves, to the legs, to the feet. Filling and surrounding the feet and the whole of the legs, the entire torso and arms and head, until you feel your whole body filled with this peace, light, presence, dense. Bring your attention once again towards the top of the head, becoming conscious of that vast ocean above, opening to it, and gently let a fresh stream of that peace, light, and presence flow down in one stream through your whole body, filling your whole being like a jar, as if the ocean pouring a little bit of itself to fill the jar, flowing down through the head, filling and surrounding the head, neck, shoulders, arms, chest. Flowing down through the abdomen, into the legs, down to the feet, filling the jar of your whole being, filling and surrounding, overflowing beyond the borders of your skin to surround you, filling the aura, the entire cocoon of your aura, filling it with peace, light, presence, pouring down from the ocean above, and remain immersed in this. enjoying the sense of peace, the sense of fullness, and the opening above the head into that vast freedom above. Remain immersed in this. And you notice that quite spontaneously there are no thoughts, no emotions. There is only this peace, and perhaps in that peace, a kind of a quiet joy, but not as an emotion, almost like a quiet delight that suffuses the whole being and surrounds you and fills you. And you remain immersed in this. Let your whole being soak up this experience. Let your whole being open upwards to the vastness that is yours. Perhaps at this point you feel your body as if larger than usual, as if swollen, as if wearing a large space suit. And that sensation of largeness is your own subtler substance, the form and extension of your own subtle body. Observe that and notice the transition that takes place to your gross body when you open your eyes. And now you prepare yourself to open your eyes, observing the transition. Slowly you become conscious of your face, the surface of your skin, the eyelids, the sensations all over the body, on the surface of the skin. And very slowly let your eyelids half open so that you remain partially inwardly aware and partially aware of what is outside. Briefly let your eyes open a little more and close them again and drift back inwards. Notice the shift that took place when your eyes opened and then when they closed and you drifted back inwards. Your awareness is once again much more in the subtle body, but when you open your eyes, it tends to quickly slip into the gross physical substance, which is much smaller, more fragile than this subtle, dense body. But for now, we will allow ourselves to settle in the surface consciousness as far as possible without losing this inward awareness. And so once again, gradually, you prepare to open your eyes, slowly drifting towards the surface awareness, becoming conscious of the sensations of the skin, of the face, of the eyes, and let your eyes open once again and remain open. You notice perhaps even now your mind is not normally thinking. It is quiet, effortlessly. And let it remain like that. Let it get habituated to this state. Perhaps you still feel the awareness of the outlines of the subtle, dense layers around the subtle body. Perhaps you still feel a sense of an opening above the head. If you do, try to retain that even with your eyes open. If you don't, you will find just closing the eyes and you'll be able to feel it once again because the consciousness interiorizes immediately. Observe that you can think when you want, but the moment you choose not to think, your mind slides back to stillness or silence. And this is the result of the settling of the peace. The consciousness, the regions of consciousness above the head, when they descend and fill the head or the rest of the being, they bring with them their characteristics: wideness, freedom, peace, light, power, knowledge, even ananda, delight. But the human system cannot hold for long and cannot receive too much at a time because it's not habituated. But by a regular practice, one can train the mind and body to receive and to hold. And then you will find you can be in the midst of all the activities of life, and you'll have this base supporting you always: a peace, a silence, even a wideness, and equality, which will be there effortlessly while in the midst of all activities. Equally, as you train your awareness to rise and open into that wideness, your mind will begin to change. It will naturally grow to become wider and freer and more flexible. And when the things of the higher ranges settle in the head, automatically they will organize themselves into a higher power of cognition corresponding to the higher mind, eventually the illumined mind. Glimpses of the intuitive experience will become more frequent, and so on. So there is a double movement, one of rising into a freer consciousness, and then one of the freer consciousness descending to transform the mind, the life energies, and even the body tissue. If you feel right now the tissue of your skin and hands feels as if lighter, feels younger, just subjectively within yourself, you will feel as if the hands feel lighter and younger. And actually, one finds the physical tissue changes quality when there is a descent of the higher consciousness in the body. So these are things which are well within our reach to begin to practice. So I said the second step is shifting the center of consciousness to here, to top of the head, where one opens to these regions, one can rise into them or have them settle in the being. We did an exercise. There are other steps which you can also put into practice for deepening, heightening, and widening your consciousness. So I will pause here, and although it may not be natural for you to think to ask questions, you could still feel and express something you want to say or something you want to know more about.
Even just listening to you talk about these things,
Mhm. Yes.
Is there some way to, I don't know, sense of that? Unsettling.
Mhm.
Is there a way of keeping
Grounded. The sense of unsettling is because it is so new. And when something small experiences the presence of a vastness, the smallness fears losing itself. And that's why it happens sometimes that in deep meditation, when one comes on the threshold of a breakthrough, people suddenly get a kind of a fear. What if I die? What if my breathing stops? Some strange thing, and then they stop. But the reason given is not valid. It's just the fear which justifies itself. But it's the fear of the smallness losing itself. There are two levels at which you can prepare yourself. One is simply to enter the experience frequently until it becomes more and more normal, familiar, and then it's not so unusual. And if you feel uncomfortable, you pause at the point where you can hold and just remain there and bathe in the presence of the vastness. And that's how the familiarity will grow, and gradually there is a kind of an osmosis, an exchange taking place. This is one way. The other is through meditation on these things, on these thoughts, these ideas, reading of things of the infinite, of eternity. One prepares the mind, prepares even our ego sense, which is the sense of separateness. And one understands that what you are meeting is not something other than you, it is yourself in freedom. And then the fear fades away because it is not someone else, something else. It is the drop realizing that it is connecting to the ocean, which was itself, from which it emerged. But it will always remain free as a drop, but it will be free in the oceanic freedom rather than in a little freedom of play. So it is the sense of recovering yourself, your own vastness, your own freedom, your own delight. And when you think of it in these terms, the fear tends to fade. So these are two different levels at which you can act. But I will say you feel it unsettling even in listening to these things because they're resonating deep inside. And because something of the being is ready for them, therefore, even listening to them or thinking of them starts the process already of shifting things. It's a good sign. For someone who's not ready, it would be, oh yeah, it feels good, and then it stops there. But if you feel things moving deep within you already, it means they're already ready and they're responding to something which they've been waiting for a long time.
I've enjoyed the two audiences we've had lately. But just to make the experience a little more real and a little more personal, could you give us a little more of your own background? For example, when you finished school, did you follow a particular career path, or
Mhm.
did you follow a religious calling early in life, or did this come later?
Okay. I had the good fortune and privilege of growing up in the ashram. And we came here when I was very small. And I grew up here, and especially in the care of my teacher, MP Pandit. And we have an unusual school in the ashram, which has a different approach to education. There are no exams, and the whole approach to learning is learning for the joy of learning. A lot of scope for developing your full potential. And so the whole educational framework was also in an ambience which was supportive of inner explorations, let's say. And being with my teacher in his house, I had the advantage or the benefit of receiving from him things which at that point I thought were normal, but which later I learned were rare. So they were experiences which just came spontaneously, being in his presence, and because he had the capacity to imprint an experience. And so many things I had experientially without understanding what they meant until much later. That was the way that the mother taught them, and he continued the same way. So she would sit with you, you would meditate with her, or sometimes she would just give you a flower, and with it would be a bundle of an experience. And if you held that with you and opened yourself, the whole experience would dawn on you. And that was her way of teaching. So we learned a lot, much more from this kind of a direct transmission of experience. He also spoke, he gave explanations and lectures on various things. So I had the advantage of that access. Almost every day he would have a lecture and we would be with him and receive things. Does that satisfy or?
When you finished that,
So when I completed my education in the ashram school, I had specialized in computers, physics, and mathematics. And I also had equal exposure to things of the metaphysical, the occult, and mystic things because they interested me. I'd read and studied a lot of things. And so I had a kind of a very broad exposure to practically a little bit of everything. But my temperament being that of a scientist and a teacher, I always try to understand things and to put them in a form where they could be articulated and applied and expressed with clarity. And my dream was always to be able to experience what we call physical science. Modern science is just a physical science. But to be able to see the continuity from physical science through occult science through to spiritual science and bridge it seamlessly. And not only in understanding, but in being able to apply that knowledge in action on those levels, but also at a material level. So that was the direction in which I spontaneously tended to move. So I did a lot of work programming because after we complete the education in the ashram school, you have a choice to stay in the ashram, in the community life, or follow whatever career path one wants. So my life was here and I worked in the ashram. I was also teaching in the school. I was working in the ashram archives, developing software and doing all kinds of activities. So there were things which I enjoyed doing, that was all. The mother wanted that in this space of the ashram and then later in Auroville, all the possibilities of the future which are waiting to manifest should be brought consciously into manifestation. So it's like humanity is still at a pace which is very slow. its development is still based on very superficial dreams or possibilities. But one can perceive things which are, we would call idealistic, utopian. But there are things, and even greater things, which are right there, waiting to manifest on earth. And the mother used to say here to our people, do not do things the way others do them, because they're already doing them. Do them in ways that others cannot even dream are possible. So it was always trying to make a breakthrough, a leap to something which is unheard of, inconceivable, and we attempt that. And we may fail, that's fine. But the attempt itself starts a process and builds a foundation which eventually leads to something. And so that's how the system of education was developed here. But she wanted this kind of an approach in every activity, including the arts. So we have some extraordinary artists here, musicians, singers. If you get a chance to see some of those samples, you'll get a feel of it. While you're in Auroville, you can go to Savitri Bhavan and see some of Huta's paintings. There's something which you can experience of a different order. And so she wanted such things to be done. And even in the domain of science, it is possible to approach in a very different way. So for me, that has been a natural domain of exploration. But the exploration is as much experiential as in understanding.
Have you ever found that your faith in these philosophies have been shaken?
There are two sides to any spiritual journey. There is one side which is the experience. You have experiences and they are an evidence in themselves. So that never shakes the faith, that only builds. But at the same time, there are parts in us which do not participate in the experience. And there are times in life where you are pushed into those parts so extremely that even the memory of the experience feels unreal. And one finds oneself in such situations also. And then you question yourself, what is this? Is it just my fantasy, my imagination? How real is it? And then sometimes there are impulses within us, instincts which pull and push in different directions, demanding things which perhaps you don't find very interesting when you're in a different state, but which become compelling when you are in their grip. And so one goes through such challenges, and then it's a choice one makes. And there's the balance of whether the inner parts which have the living experience are stronger, or the surface parts which have the doubt and confusion are stronger. And there's always someone, the true person within, who can assert a choice. And then there is also the protection and the grace which helps you. Sometimes, and it happened to me in a very intense way, you are led through experiences which are painful to the extreme, but which are necessary for your growth, just to be able to break something and move beyond it. So such things have also happened. I had experiences where it was very clear I was being led into something, and I couldn't understand why I had to go through it. Because I thought, that all belongs to things I have chosen not to pursue. And there was a period, just as an example, when it was as if all the experiences were taken away. So I would be this empty shell, weeks, months at a time, and struggling to see why is this. And I knew it was taken away because it would happen that when it first started, I had already commitments for travel and for lectures. And I remember the first time I was in a place where I had to speak to maybe 800 students. And I was wondering, what will I say to them? The only thing because I won't say something which is just theory. It must be a living truth for me. Otherwise, I won't speak of it. And the only truth I know is life is not worth living because it's just this empty shell of meaningless existence. What will I say? And I go to the stage, I walk up 3 steps, On the third step, when I step on the top, everything flows in. And I'm as I was before, full, complete with the whole thing. And I speak whatever was needed. I come back from there, I take 3 steps down, and shoop, the whole thing is sucked out, gone. And I'm this shell. It was painful. It was so painful. And there were other things which were, but it broke. It was necessary to break the ego sense, the physical ego especially. That the body itself had to be taught that it was nothing without the divine. And it was only the divine which brings meaning and fullness and joy and purpose in life. There's nothing without that. Because before that, the experiences being piled up, it was easy to claim them. This is mine. I am this. I cannot lose it because I am this. And the ego tends to catch and aggrandize itself. And so it had to be taught, and on a very physical level, that you are nothing. There is only the divine which is everything. And you exist only in relation to that. So the passage was painful physically, although at some point I was conscious it was being done to me. And I couldn't understand why. There was even a resentment. Why are you doing this to me? But it came through. And so that was perhaps, I would say, perhaps the worst. But once the shell is broken, the ego reforms, but it doesn't have the same consistency anymore. While it was there before, you don't know what it's like to be free of the ego, because you've never experienced it. Once having passed through, and once it was really, really crushed, although it reforms, you play with it like a toy. You're not really attached to the ego sense. So there are experiences like that, yes, where you question why you do, what is this? But you also know in some other part, deeper and higher, that it's something which is necessary, you have to pass through and then move on. And it is the assurance that there's something greater to come.
Do you think that this, for spiritual life, you have to withdraw from society?
So this was the central message in Sri Aurobindo's teaching, that you do not have to withdraw from life to realize the divine. That the divine is essentially all. And therefore, one can be in every activity of life and still pursue a path of conscious self-development and conscious alignment with your pursuit of experiencing and realizing your own divine possibilities. So if you think of it in those terms, you're moving to fulfill yourself. Your highest fulfillment is in oneness with the divine consciousness. But the steps you take are just steps in that direction in the midst of all activities. And if you realize the world itself is only a manifestation of the divine consciousness, everything in life is secretly arranged to help you grow. There's nothing which fundamentally opposes. Even in its opposition, it is helping you to grow. Right? So if you take it in that spirit and accept that the divine grace will lead, protect, and guide you through the maze of life, then it's possible to do that. And so in the ashram here, you will find there is not a monastic life of withdrawal from the world. There's a kind of a partial isolation because we're trying to organize a new way of living. So to that extent, you have to separate from the old way of living. But there is a very porous border through which we are in constant interchange with the world.
And very interesting how natural it was to feel that peace.
Yes.
Just
Yes. Yes. In fact, if you think about it, the whole universe being an expression of the divine will, essentially, everything in life naturally has to flow towards the divine. And therefore, pursuit of a spiritual life is the most natural thing. To not pursue a spiritual life is unnatural, is difficult, because it's a crooked journey. So there was a child who asked the mother, "What is spiritual life?" And he was very small, I think less than 10. So mother drew a picture. She drew a little spot. This is you. She drew a little square up. This is the divine. And then she drew a line which goes like this. And it widens out and then again narrows. And she said, "This is normal life." And then she drew a straight line and said, "This is spiritual life." You still end up going exactly the same way. The meandering path is replaced by a more direct path. Of course, it's never absolutely direct. It's just the meanderings becomes less, and it becomes less and less meandering as you go. Also in the nature of the integral yoga, because our goal is not only to realize the divine in consciousness, but also to manifest that and to transform our whole nature. The mind to grow into that luminosity of the higher ranges of knowledge. Our life energies to become vehicles for the omnipotence to act. The body itself as a vehicle to express beauty and harmony. And our soul and heart to express love. But a divine knowledge, divine power, divine beauty, and divine love. So everything is taken up into the ambit of the yoga. Unlike the ascetic yogic paths, where withdrawal from life is necessary because you want to abandon your nature to free your consciousness, here the goal being to transform your nature, you cannot withdraw from life, you have to engage with life. That's the domain in which you're developing your nature also. It's hard. If you think about it in those terms, it seems hard. But let me put it to you this way. To separate from your nature and withdraw is harder because you're doing something unnatural. Whereas to fill your nature with peace, joy, and love is easier because that's the way the divine will is working and the way the evolution is working. So if you think about transforming nature, oh, it's a big thing, it's hard. Filling your heart with love, filling your mind with light and peace, it's easier than withdrawing from your mind, withdrawing from the body and killing the mind and suppressing all your... No, that's much harder. That's painful. This is joyous. But you experienced when the peace settles, it is spontaneous, it is natural. And that's how it does the work. The divine works in you and works to transform. It's not that you are struggling. In closing the discussion, I will leave you with a simple exercise. I think I mentioned that last time, isn't it? For the end of the day and beginning of the day. So you could add to that this thing which we did today. Center yourself at the top of the head, open, if you like, rise into that wideness and freedom, or bring down that peace and light into your being, or both. And this would be one exercise. The other would be going deep into your heart, as if gathering all your attention to the center of the chest and then deepening from there, trying to feel the source of your deepest aspirations, trying to feel that deep core within you where you feel spontaneously the sense of the sacred, the love for the divine. We use this word in Sanskrit, bhakti. Devotion is a loose translation. But the part in you which feels itself looking at the universe and at the divine and says, oh, this is sacred, this is beautiful, and wants to give itself joyously. That feeling is deep within us, all of us. And you try to feel the source of that and you try to drift inwards towards that. And the experience is very different. It's more like going deep into a tunnel. And these are two different activities, two different exercises. But at some point they may merge. So you may feel this rising and the descent of peace, and then you may go deep within spontaneously, as happened to us when we wanted to remain quiet and just remain indrawn. Or you may go deep within and then from there rise into this higher freedom. But start with what's natural and then let the experience lead you. But if you spend a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, and make a point of contact with the divine presence, within, above, around, whatever form it takes, make that point of contact. And then let its light, peace, and joy fill you. Then carry it like what you experience now. It's almost as if your body is a container, not just your body, your whole being is a container. And you hold this in you as you enter your day's activities. And as you hold it, it works in you, filling your day, filling your activities, even filling your tissue and substance of the body, molding from within and changing. And you'll find very quickly, within a few days, your whole pattern of life experience will undergo a profound transformation. And the only thing you will have done in terms of effort would be to open, to receive, and then to hold. And all the rest will be done by the divine consciousness that fills you. We can close with a short concentration. And you'll notice when you close your eyes and drift inwards, the peace which you felt, the light which you felt, it's all there intact. You just turn in slightly and you'll find it is all there. And then holding that, try to extend that awareness through the whole evening, even until you go to sleep today. We can all chant Om together 3 times. Om.